Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dutip. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and all around the world. Check out these monitors that you see right here. These are news feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. If there's something happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here in Studio 55. Let us begin. Several of President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks will face questions from senators today. Who's in the hot seat and the takeaways from the contentious start to this week's confirmation hearings. Plus, fire victims begin picking up the pieces in California as incoming dangerous winds threaten to fuel the wildfire flames. The latest on the efforts to contain the fires. And President Biden bids farewell. What to expect from his final Oval Office speech tonight. This is CBS News 24/7. We begin on Capitol Hill, where confirmation hearings for President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks are ramping up today, with several top positions under the spotlight. Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi, her hearing is in full swing. Let's dip in for just a bit.
U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi will restore law and order to the nation. She'll put Americans' interests first and make the nation a better and safer place. I urge every single member of this committee to support my friend Pam Bondi, and I look forward to voting for her confirmation soon on the Senate floor and help her get to work for the American people. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Durbin, and members of the committee. It is an honor for me and a privilege to introduce Pam Bondi, President Trump's nominee to be the 87th Attorney General of the United States. I have known and worked closely with Pam for years, and I'm glad to call her a friend. When Pam was nominated by President Trump, my reaction was, this is a home run. As many of us are, I was only to be outdone by Senator Graham, who described the nomination as a grand slam, touchdown, hole-in-one, ace, hat trick, slam dunk, Olympic gold medal pick, and he's right. As the letter joined by more than 100 former Justice Department officials put it, quote, it's all too rare for senior Justice Department officials, much less attorneys general, to have such a wealth of experience in the day-to-day work of keeping our communities safe, end quote. Pam exemplifies and personifies the Department of Justice's mission to uphold the rule of law, to keep our communities safe, and to protect our rights and liberties as Americans. Pam has distinguished herself in her career in public service that has taken her from her small-town upbringing in Temple Terrace, Florida, to a hearing before this esteemed committee. After attending the University of Florida and Stetson University College of Law, she started her career as a local prosecutor in Hillsborough County, Florida. As a local prosecutor for nearly 2 decades, Pam kept her community safe, prosecuting violent criminals, drug dealers, those who had threatened the local community, and those who stood in opposition to the rule of law. Pam's fellow Floridians then elected her to serve as Florida's Attorney General, where she was the first woman in state history elected to that office. As a former state Attorney General myself, I can vouch for the deep experience that Pam Bondi has developed from serving in that role. As the chief law enforcement official in her state, she worked with local prosecutors to fight crime, work to protect our constitutional rights.
All right, we're just dipping in there as Pam Bondi begins her hearing for Attorney General. I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland to talk more about this. Scott, as you know, Pam Bondi has quite a high level of favorability among the Republican majority for the nation's top prosecutor. So what kind of tough questions, if any, can we expect? Because even some Democrats, I'm guessing, it won't be as controversial as the hearing that we saw yesterday for Pete Hegseth, but still tough. So what do we expect?
The Democrats have shown their roadmap through what Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois said a few minutes ago. They're going to question her on her role in trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election. She was a close ally of Donald Trump during that process between Election Day and Inauguration Day 2021. She was part of the effort to overturn the results in Pennsylvania. She's going to be asked about that. I suspect she'll also be pressed, Vlad, as to whether she still believes these false claims of the rigging of the 2020 election and her thoughts on January 6th. How aligned is she with Donald Trump on denying the U.S. Capitol riot? These may not detour or derail her nomination, but Democrats want her to speak to this today as they prepare for the next Trump administration. This is custom, Vlad, to have two introducers for nominees. You first heard from Rick Scott, the junior senator from Florida. Eric Schmitt, who was a former attorney general of the state of Missouri, is now the senator from the state of Missouri. Is actually introducing her from the dais because he's a member of the Judiciary Committee. It's going to be a long hearing, Vlad. There's one particular questioner I'm waiting for at the very end. California Senator Adam Schiff, new to the Senate. He was part of that House January 6th Select Committee. He investigated the insurrection. He has a chance to ask her questions about that after she takes questions after her opening statement, which appears poised to begin.
All right. Senator Schmitt, he's the one, Scott, who yesterday during that hearing for Pete Hegseth talked about incompetence in the military, but spelled military wrong. Is that the senator you're referring to?
Eric Schmitt is one of the most closely aligned Trump allies in the U.S. Senate. His name was actually floated early in the process as a possible candidate to be Attorney General, but no surprise, he introduced Pam Bondi. They are very close as former state attorneys general.
Interesting. Let's listen in to Pam Bondi, is what I'm being told from the control room. Scott, let's listen.
Opportunity to meet with almost all of you, and I greatly appreciate that. I'm grateful to President Trump and to this committee for your consideration to be the 87th Attorney General of the United States. I would not be here without my family. And if you can bear with me for just a moment, a lot of them have made a very long trip, and I wrote them all down so I don't forget anyone. My beautiful mother, who I wouldn't be here, a retired kindergarten teacher, would not be here without my mom. As of a week ago, it was 12 years since we lost my dad to leukemia. Feels like 12 days. My amazing husband, John, and his two incredible girls, Collins and Finley. Collins is a senior at University of Florida, and I think all of you on this committee will be very happy to know Finley is in cybersecurity. There's a third who is traveling abroad. I wish she could be here. My amazing father-in-law, David, my sister, Beth, my brother-in-law is home with my niece, my nephews. If you could just raise your hand, Evan, Jake.
All right, Pam Bondi there preparing for her confirmation hearing, shouting out members of her family, as each nominee typically does. Let's go back to Scott MacFarlane, who's tracking developments on the Hill for us. Scott, let's talk about Marco Rubio. Seems to be a fairly non-controversial choice for Secretary of State. What's the vibe with Democrats and Marco Rubio? I mean, I know that he's a former never-Trumper turned big-time Trump supporter, but what is his relationship with Democrats in the Senate?
This is a whole different dynamic, this particular choice, Vlad. Imagine going for a job interview at a new company across the country. Then imagine going for a job interview in your own office with your own colleagues and your own boss. That's the dynamic Marco Rubio faces because he is seeking the confirmation of his own colleagues in the U.S. Senate, some of whom he's built some particularly strong relationships with. He's actually been a top Republican on one of the more bipartisan panels, the Senate Intelligence Committee. Easy to form bipartisan relationships there. He's going to benefit from that during this process. He will sit before the senators over whom he has seniority in some cases. This will be arguably or potentially, Vlad, the lowest stress, lowest drama of all Senate confirmation hearings this week.
All right, and we'll be watching. Scott MacFarlane for us. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you. Trump's nominee for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, as we just indicated, is delivering her opening remarks in that confirmation hearing. Let's listen in.
Chief of a division, and then ultimately was
in the teleprompter, which we are rectifying. So now let's get to this. The U.S., Arab, and Israeli officials tell CBS News that Israel and Hamas have agreed in principle to a ceasefire and hostage release draft deal. Negotiators are still working to hammer out the final details of that agreement in Qatar. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is following the very latest from Tel Aviv. Ramy, could we finally get a deal? That is the question on everyone's mind.
In short answer, that is where this very much appears to be headed. The word that's on my mind is imminent. That has been talked about over the past several hours since this morning. And CBS News has learned from two sources familiar with the details that Hamas has given the green light for this deal. We got a short quote from those sources earlier saying that, quote, "we are very close," and the target now is for an agreement today or tomorrow, maybe as early as tonight, that deal will be signed. And as we know, this would put at least a ceasefire, not an end, but a ceasefire to now 466 days of war, the release of what we understand to be 98 Israeli hostages for hundreds of Palestinian detainees, and that pause on the death toll that keeps rising in Gaza, that's risen to nearly 47,000 people. And of course, that's according to the Hamas-run health ministry. But, you know, Vlad, across Israeli media, we're seeing similar reporting as what we've got. They're talking about a breakthrough, a quote there, in talks in Doha, a meeting with Hamas leadership that ended when most disputes were resolved, and that government meetings will be held tomorrow. If all this goes ahead, the agreement could be implemented by this weekend. And I think the optics we're waiting to see, just like happened 13 months ago, is that we could start to see the release at least of a handful of hostages this weekend.
And how, Rami, are loved ones of those being held by Hamas in Gaza reacting to the news that they may be finally getting closer to seeing their loved ones?
Yeah, sure. Vlad, I would describe this as an anxious hope that they're alive, but of course the anxious fear, I suppose, that they're dead. So many mothers, fathers, siblings, friends that we've talked to don't want to hope again, and it's horrible really to say that, but in this case, in case this falls apart, that is their fear. These talks since last summer have gone ahead and then collapsed, and before the news broke, this breakthrough, we have been talking to so many people. We attended protests. We attended one silent protest in Jerusalem, families and friends of hostages there. One friend of one of the hostages, 28-year-old Romy Gonen, who still is in Gaza, who's on that list of 33, by the way, that we've been talking about the past few days, told us about her anxiety. Have a listen. This is her friend, Avital Lieberman.
I try to be very cautious and not get too excited because there have been lists before. We just keep hoping and then getting our hopes up and our hearts shatter. So I try not to get too excited, but stay hopeful. As long as it's not everyone, my heart will never be whole because we've all become one family and we want everyone to be home. It's an amazing start and I think we should bring them home so that we can start bringing everybody home, but it's just the beginning.
Yeah, the beginning, possibly the beginning of the end, but the end still could take many months, really. We did speak to other families. Cynicism of Hamas is what they're telling us, that they're playing games, but again, hope, and we'll again get confirmation soon, perhaps in the next few hours this evening, to see if that waiting for so many people here is finally over.
Would be remarkable, Rami, if that happens in the next couple of hours before President Biden delivers his final farewell address from the Oval Office. We'll be watching. All right, Rami Inocencio for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Rami. The wildfires that are devastating Southern California have now burned for over a week with more high winds expected today. Officials say homeowners have also another worry. Looters are taking advantage and burglarizing homes abandoned during those evacuations. Police have now made around 50 arrests. I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Elise Preston, who's following all of this from Altadena, California. So from the very beginning, Elise, police officials told you, members of the media, that there will be no tolerance at all for anyone taking advantage during these moments of heartbreak. But what are you learning about folks that they have arrested?
So we do know that we know at least one of those people that was a suspected looter actually tried to arrive to a scene and they were dressed as a firefighter. They had some type of clothing, but they are not allowing anyone back. We're here in this area that has been devastated by the fires. As you can see, they're not allowing anyone back here. There are blockades at every checkpoint, and we're running into police officers, sheriff's deputies, and National Guardsmen, and they are thoroughly checking IDs. We have had to show 2 press badges and a driver's license just to ensure that we are who we say we are before we're able to get back here. You know, there are some families that are able to stay not too far from this area that are in their homes this morning. And they also say that looters will not be tolerated. I passed a house just the other day, Vlad, and there was a giant sign, and it clearly stated on both sides of the house, looters will be shot. So, the homeowners have also said that they will not tolerate it either.
Let's talk about families that have been impacted by the fires. You actually spoke to one. I know it's just one of thousands of people who are suffering and feeling that heartbreak, but what did this particular family tell you?
Absolutely devastating, Vlad. This home that I'm standing in front of is one of 7 that a family lost to the fire. These were multi-generational homes. 4 generations lived in these homes, and they all lived within a block of each other. This family immigrated to the U.S. from Costa Rica first in the 1960s, and they've lived in the same homes for decades, for generations. And so when the fire broke out on Tuesday, for the most part, the family was able to get out of the home. However, there was a relative, an 86-year-old Miva Friedley, who did not evacuate. She did not leave her home. And her family told us yesterday that she was found inside her home, that they found her remains. So the family is grappling with a lot. They are mourning the loss of a loved one. They're also dealing with the loss, as we said, of 7 homes, and 21 family members are displaced this morning. I spoke to one of the older relatives. He was the first one to come to the U.S. from Costa Rica, and he broke down so emotional, Vlad. He said, I was a young man when I came to this country. I came to this country with the clothes on my back and $50, and after 50 years of hard work, I have nothing to show for it. I'm homeless. And so the family is dealing with a lot, though they say they are faithful, and they will just continue to rely on each other and their faith.
It's such a horrible story, and it's just one of so many. Elise, thank you very much for your reporting. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant, what are those winds looking like out west?
Yeah, well, look, Vlad, I think we have one more day of those particularly concerning gusty conditions out there to go along with the low relative humidity. So about another 24 to 36 hours that all these people are going to have to continue just to really be on high alert. Red flag warnings in effect through much of the area across Southern California, but there's this particularly dangerous situation that's highlighted in that red flag warning just north of L.A. into L.A. County up into Ventura County that we're have to watch out for. Not just the dry conditions, but those gusty winds that will be up there around 50 to 60 miles per hour, maybe some cases a little bit stronger than that. But compared to the last couple of days where we had extreme fire danger, the fire danger level today is a critical fire danger, which, I mean, we're really splitting hairs here. So it's a little bit better. It gets a little bit better again tomorrow with just an elevated risk for fire danger tomorrow. Now, the relative humidity will stay relatively low through tomorrow afternoon, but the winds begin to die down tomorrow. The relative humidity will begin to increase with more moisture returning as we head into Friday afternoon. We got to talk about the cold air that's moving into the eastern half of the United States. It's cold now, Vlad, but it gets much colder, dangerously cold into next week. We'll have more on that forecast in just a bit.
Thank you, Grant. Appreciate it. Coming up, a key inflation indicator dropped this morning. We're going to tell you what it tells us about the state of the economy and how it impacts your wallet. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. New inflation numbers out today show U.S. consumers face rising prices for a third straight month in December. The just-released Consumer Price Index was up 2.9% year over year. That marks 3 months in a row of increases. Experts are warning anyone hoping for a possible rate cut by the Fed to prepare for delays or even hikes instead. Check out the market, which is now almost up 700. Let's bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. She's joining me right here in Studio 55. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
All right, so where did consumers see the biggest hikes in prices last month?
Energy. Okay, that was a big one. It was up 2.6% versus last month. Gasoline was up 4.4%. I have to fill up my tank later today. Not looking forward to that. You also saw increases in shelter and food. So really kind of think about it, right? These are the necessities. These are the need to have, not the nice to have. And energy and gasoline in particular, I always look at that because it's not just about what you and I are paying at the pump. Think about how do our goods get to the grocery store, right? It's on trucks, diesel prices. So that always tends to flow through as well.
So the Fed's target a baseline of inflation of about 2%. We're almost at 3 now. What's the feeling about what the Fed is going to do?
Pause. And by the way, they should have done that. You and I talked about this last month. It was really a head scratcher that they did cut. So last month they said, look, we're going to get 2 interest rate cuts in 2025 instead of 4. We're expecting them to hold rates the same at the end of this month when they meet. But I also sort of put this into broader context. We have a new administration coming in.
Right.
A lot of the policies, if taken in a vacuum, could be inflationary. And so you think about how you've got an environment where inflation is ticking up. You have a new administration coming in with policies that could increase that. Yes, now is the right time to pause.
Let me ask you about something, because we're looking at the stock market this morning and it's up big. But the former president, now the president-elect, his view of what constituted a good economy was looking at the stock market. You remember back in the 2016 to 2020 era, he tweeted constantly about the stock market. He rarely tweeted about the CPI or what LIBOR was doing, right? So I wonder what you think is going to happen in the first couple of months, first quarter of his administration, because that's how he's going to see whether he's doing well or not.
This is really interesting, and I just also want to put into context of why the market is up today. So even though the fact that we saw the increase in inflation, it is in line with expectations. A lot of the trading that happens is based on algorithms, and they look for particular words. Now, in terms of President-elect Trump, I mean, the stock market went bananas under Biden, too. We also have to see that. I think where you're going to see investors over these next few months, we're in earnings season. A lot of the growth is going to be driven by good earnings. We are expecting earnings growth. So you could see good things there. If some of the policies that he introduces, though, like tariffs, deportations, cause a lot of concern around maybe some of the big retailers like a Walmart, that's where you could see investors go, right? So it's sort of some positive stuff, some negative stuff.
I was anecdotally, I know this is just an anecdote, but I suspect this will be playing out across the country. I was in a restaurant this weekend picking up some food, and everyone in this restaurant, Kelly, was a delivery person, and almost all of them were immigrants. Now, I don't know their status, but I suspect that you're going to see this across the country. If this goes into effect, businesses are going to suffer. And that means we suffer. So,
and just to put into context also, you think about rebuilding in LA with the wildfires.
Yes. Who's going to do that work?
That's also going to be a problem.
That's right. Exactly. All right, Kelly O'Grady, always great to have you here. Appreciate it. President Biden is gearing up for his final Oval Office address. What we can expect him to say about the legacy he leaves behind. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. President-elect Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is delivering his opening remarks in his confirmation hearing. Let's listen.
Are joining me here today, and to me, it's a reminder that the path that brings me to this moment was paved by those who are not here with us today, by 2 parents who arrived here on May 27th of 1956 from Cuba, and they had nothing but the dreams of a better life. And because of them, I had the privilege to be born a citizen of the greatest nation in the history of mankind, and to be raised in a safe and stable home by parents who made their children's future the very purpose of their lives. I also want to acknowledge all the blessings that God has bestowed upon me in my life. My faith is critical and something I will lean and rely on heavily in the months that are ahead. In a tumultuous world where, in my faith, we are called to promote the cause of peace and the common good. And that task has gotten harder than it's ever been. And I will rely heavily on my faith and pray for God's blessings, that He will provide me the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to do what is right in these tenuous moments. At the end of the Second World War, the United States was, in the words of then Secretary of State, tasked with creating an order, a world order, a free half, as he quote in his quote, out of chaos, without blowing to pieces, without blowing the whole of the world into pieces in the process. And in the decades that followed, that global order served us quite well. Americans' incomes rose and communities flourished. Alliances emerged in the Indo-Pacific and Europe that led to the emergence of stability and democracy and prosperity in these regions.
You've had forever war ever since. Little Marco, keep your hands
Back to order. All right, alliances emerged in the Indo-Pacific and in Europe that led to the emergence of stability.
All right, you are listening to Senator Marco Rubio, who is there for his confirmation hearing. He has been nominated by President-elect Trump to be the next Secretary of State. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is joining us now from West Palm Beach, Florida. So, Nancy, I was having a conversation earlier with Scott McFarland about Rubio's chances. I would suggest, and you know better than I do, this is just me being a sideliner, that if anybody has a chance of sailing through this nominating process, it's perhaps Senator Rubio?
Right. I mean, not only do these senators know Rubio, he is a third-term senator, a senior member, but senators have a lot of pride in their position. They tend to think that being a senator prepares you pretty well for any number of positions. So they like the fact that one of their own has been nominated to be Secretary of State. Even the Democrats feel that way because they believe that some of the other individuals who have been nominated to top positions, like Pete Hegseth, who we heard from yesterday, they don't think that those individuals have the right kind of expertise to be successful in their chosen jobs. And so they're feeling pretty good about Marco Rubio, barring something truly unforeseen. I think it's going to be a walk in the park for him to get not only confirmed, but to be one of the very first members of Trump's cabinet to be confirmed, most likely on day one of the Trump presidency.
So let me ask you, Nancy, about what we saw yesterday with regards to Pete Hegseth, who's been nominated as Defense Secretary. Right. It does seem like he's headed for an approval, even though Democrats really sort of sounded the clarion call over the allegations of his extramarital affairs, some of the drinking that people have suggested, have alleged that he's taken a part in. But I read something interesting in Politico, and I want to get your take on it today, which is that it seems as if the people who appear on cable news, all the pundits who are always chattering about this and that, and sort of the WWE aspect of politics in Washington, are certainly pointing to what was talked about yesterday at Hegseth's confirmation hearing, because it makes for great cable television, but there might be missing the boat on Tulsi Gabbard, who has some real issues that even some Republicans have problems with, and that the press seems to be sort of not hyping that as much as they did this sort of sexy stuff in Hegseth's background.
Right, and partly that's because some of Gabbard's issues are still not fully known. Yes, we have talked about the fact that she visited Syria and met with Bashar al-Assad, the deposed dictator, back in 2017 or 2019. That's something that Democrats and Republicans alike have concerns about. But because she is going up for the Director of National Intelligence, and intelligence is such a major focus, there are more questions about her background and the FBI background check that's being done, but Democrats haven't gotten a look at that yet, nor have Republicans. It's still being done. She's had some paperwork issues, so that's delaying her confirmation hearing. So it's very possible that there could be something that comes out that is so new and startling that it causes an uproar, like we saw with Hegseth, where, just after he was nominated, there were issues in his background that even Trump didn't know about when he nominated him, issues of allegations of sexual misconduct, for example. So right now with Tulsi Gabbard, it's a little quiet. We don't even know when her confirmation hearing is going to happen. So let's see what happens between now and then.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And really quickly, Nancy, just before you go, do we know if she's met with both Republican and Democrat senators? Because I know yesterday during the confirmations for Hegseth, almost all the Democrats seemed to indicate that he had not met with them, even though they had requested that he meet with them. What are we knowing, or what are we hearing about if Gabbard is meeting with some of these folks on both sides of the aisle?
Right, that was a real sticking point. Gabbard has met with some Democrats, most notably Mark Warner, who is the lead Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee. That is important because she'll be going before the Intelligence Committee for her confirmation hearing. And the Intelligence Committee operates a little differently than any other committee. They work together very closely. They deal with these very important, very secretive issues of national intelligence. So Democrats have more influence on that committee than they would on most others. And that's why that was an important meeting. Afterwards, Warner said he still has some concerns.
All right. Nancy Cordes, as always, with some really critical details for us. Thank you, Nancy, for your reporting. Thank you. As we indicated, President Biden will deliver a farewell address to the nation tonight as he wraps up the last few days of his presidency before President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. It will be the final time we hear from the president in the Oval Office. I want to bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. He's joining me now from the White House to talk more about this. So, Willie James, the White House released a letter from the President of the United States. What did it say?
Hey there, Vlad. Well, this letter that the president released to the American public serves as a preview of sorts for the president's remarks behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office tonight. And one of those statements, or parts of that letter, I should say, that stuck out to me, I want to bring it up for our viewers on the screen there. The president says in this letter, "I ran for president because I believed that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake, and that's still the case." And the president goes on to say in this letter that it's been the privilege of a lifetime for him to serve not only as president, but of course, he served in other roles for over 50 years. That's what he notes in this letter. He also talks about some of the things that he sees as major accomplishments, record job growth, over 16 million jobs since he became president of the United States. And he also touched on where we were at that time when he took over in the White House. We were still dealing with the remnants of COVID-19. The vaccine was still not widely available for many Americans across this country. But he also said in his letter, Vlad, he said, "We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure." And that is, of course, something that he hands off to President-elect Donald Trump. In his words, the president saying that the current president-elect is on a better footing since President Biden has been in office here at the White House, Vlad.
Yeah. All right. Willie James Inman for us. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And as a reminder, we're going to bring you the president's farewell address live tonight right here on CBS News 24/7 at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Coming up, with just days left before TikTok's potential U.S. ban, millions of users are flocking to a different Chinese-owned app. We're going to tell you about it. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Trump's nominee for CIA director is John Ratcliffe. He is now delivering opening remarks in his confirmation hearing. Let's listen in.
Continue and increase in intensity the focus on the threats posed by China and its ruling Chinese Communist Party. As DNI, I dramatically increased the intelligence community's resources devoted to China. I openly warned the American people that from my unique vantage point as an official who saw more intelligence than anyone else, I assessed that China was far and away our top national security threat. President Trump has been an incredible leader on this issue, and it is encouraging that a bipartisan consensus has emerged in recent years. The recent creation of the CIA's China Mission Center is an example of the good work that must continue. In closing, the agency must provide the President and U.S. policymakers with the best possible intelligence to inform their decision-making in hopes of preserving peace and spreading prosperity. This is our once-in-a-generation challenge. The intelligence is clear. Our response must be clear as well. I'm honored for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I thank you for your consideration of my nomination to be the director of the CIA, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ratcliffe. Colleagues, I'll remind you that
obviously, we are following several hearings today as we listen in on John Ratcliffe's nominating confirmation hearing. We know that it's going to eventually be closed to the press because he is obviously being nominated for the head of the CIA. So the information that they will be talking about will be classified. We'll keep an eye on it, though. Meanwhile, just days away from an anticipated TikTok ban, Americans are turning to another Chinese-owned app known as RedNote. The social media platform has over 300 million users, mostly in China, and is currently the most downloaded free app in the United States. The digital migration comes after a Supreme Court decision effectively bans TikTok if its Chinese-based parent company ByteDance does not sell the app by January 19th. That's Sunday. Lawmakers raised data concerns for 170 million TikTok users here in the United States, along with concerns over the spread of false information. Meanwhile, some states are moving to ban cell phones from schools almost entirely. While some welcome the reduced distractions, many concerned parents in New Jersey aren't convinced it's a good thing. CBS News Philadelphia reporter Aziza Schuler reports.
For New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, enough is enough when it comes to
cell phones. I hope they don't throw one at me over.
During his State of the State address, Murphy stood tall as a champion against cell phones in classrooms, blaming the devices for disrupting children's education, declining mental health, and fueling cyberbullying.
I, for one, am not going to sit back as our kids suffer. So today I am officially announcing my support for a new proposal that will direct school districts across New Jersey to adopt policies that ban cell phones for our K through 12 classrooms.
When we took Murphy's plan to the streets of Cherry Hill Tuesday night, unsurprisingly, everyone we spoke to agreed on one thing: cell phones are distracting students.
I don't know, I'm old school. I think it's a distraction.
Well, I understand it could be a distraction. Kids need to interact more these days. Like, social media is really distracting a lot of people.
This school year, Cherry Hill Public Schools banned all electronics from classrooms. Recent graduate Afreen Abazi candidly admits that would have improved her focus.
I was always texting on the side. My cell phones were dropping.
However, some parents aren't completely on board.
What about emergencies? What about, my child's sick? I get turning it off during school hours. I'm fine with that and not doing anything. But as far as banning them, I'm not with that.
I think it should be the teacher's call in the classroom. I don't know. It's my perspective. Teachers in charge of my kids during the day, and I want them to have the most respected environment possible.
So how do teachers feel about this? In a statement, the New Jersey Education Association applauded Governor Murphy for, quote, highlighting the concerns that so many educators and parents have about the detrimental effects of cell phones in classrooms. But the union would like the New Jersey Department of Education to collaborate with communities to develop tailored policies per district rather than, quote, any one-size-fits-all ban imposed from above. Aziza Schuler, CBS News, Philadelphia.
All right, coming up, more news. You are streaming CBS News 24/7. South Korea's impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol, has become the country's first ever sitting leader to be arrested. The massive law enforcement operation involved more than 3,000 police officers at the presidential compound. Yoon is being investigated for criminal insurrection after his botched attempt to impose martial law at the end of last year. Juna Moon, with our partners at the BBC News, has more from Seoul.
This is the first time in the country's constitutional history that a sitting president has been arrested. Yoon is now at the Corruption Investigative Office, and the CIO began questioning him on charges of leading an insurrection. However, Yoon is exercising his right to remain silent. He did not respond to any of the questions during the morning session, according to local media. He may continue to remain silent throughout the investigation, as he previously stated that he agreed to the interrogation to prevent a violent escalation, not because the process is legitimate. His legal team also insists that the CIO's arrest warrants are illegal and invalid. So CIO can now hold Yoon for up to 48 hours or obtain a detention warrant within this period to keep him. If the court refuses to issue the warrant, Yoon will be released. But in case that the detention warrant is issued, Yoon can be detained for up to 20 days before being brought to the trial. Though Yoon may be arrested, South Korea's political crisis is far from over.
Fighting the flames is still a top priority in Los Angeles, but questions about rebuilding are starting to move into focus, especially how to pay for it. CBS News' Elizabeth Cook reports from California, where 7 of the 12 largest insurers have frozen or restricted new businesses in the last 2 years.
The fires that tore through Altadena turned the family home of Jeff and Jennifer Cohen from this to this.
I think there's some walls up. It seems like the second floor collapsed onto the first, but I couldn't tell you if there's anything salvageable.
Getting money to rebuild will take time, a long time. The Cohens have found temporary housing, but are among the 100,000 plus Los Angeles homeowners whose insurance had been dropped before the latest wildfires.
Did they give a reason why?
It's the fire hazard, it's the fire danger. You know, we were in an area that they couldn't provide insurance to any longer.
As victims like the Cohens come to grips with a devastating loss, analysts predict insurers could pay out more than $20 billion just from this wildfire disaster alone.
The kind of risk has been changing very quickly.
University of California Associate Professor Frances Moore studies the economics of climate change.
Any kind of healthy kind of financial risk management, we really want the insurers to have an accurate picture of what that risk is.
Nationwide, the insurance industry already faces tens of billions of dollars in losses from natural disasters.
So this icon is a simulated ignition point.
Rob Newbold of the company Verisk says one way to financially plan for those disasters could include computer-generated catastrophic models.
How does the climate conditions in terms of temperature and weather, taken together with where the properties are, with infrastructure in terms of things like putting the fires out, prevalence of local fire stations, prevalence of local fire breaks, all of these come together to run simulations of what could happen over the next 1 year of activity.
Verisk already offers to insurers around the country models covering everything from wildfires to tornadoes to hurricanes.
We have this deeper red color over in and around Beverly Hills. That indicates there's greater loss potential based both on the ignition point, the spread rate, the intensity of the fire, as well as the value of the exposures within that zip code. The insurance company can understand this loss potential and have sufficient money on hand to pay claims.
Under an old law to protect consumers, California regulators prohibited using models like these to help set rates. But the state is lifting that ban. Verisk is the first company to submit its models for approval.
What have you done? What has this experience been like trying to find new insurance?
So that was quite an ordeal.
The Cohens eventually found coverage, but only through a government-sponsored pool, and it's at a much higher cost than what they paid. But even that pool may not have enough money to cover the expected Los Angeles fire damage claims.
Will you rebuild in California?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know.
We're just mourning the loss of all, the things that are irreplaceable.
Precious memories are in that home.
Those are the irreplaceable things.
Today, they live in limbo after the fires burned their home of 23 years to the ground. For Eye on America, I'm Elizabeth Cook in Los Angeles.
All right, we want to dip back into Pam Bondi's confirmation for Attorney General. She's facing some questions from senators right now, including Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Let's listen.
Senator, it will be my job, if confirmed as Attorney General, to make those decisions. Politics will not play a part. I've demonstrated that my entire career as a prosecutor, as Attorney General, and I will continue to do that if you confirm me as the 87th Attorney General of the United States of America.
In an earlier question, some of my colleagues talked about China and the risk. Yet you have a nominee from this incoming administration, Kash Patel, the pick to head the FBI, have serious concerns about him, has referred to the FBI's intel division, which is responsible for protecting us from foreign adversaries like China, as, quote, the biggest problem the FBI has had, and he said that he wants to, quote, break that component out of the FBI. Do you agree?
I have not seen those comments from Mr. Patel. I would review them, but we have to do everything we can to protect our country. Again, Mr. Patel would fall under me and the Department of Justice, and I will ensure that all laws are followed, and so will he.
Okay. There are many decisions made by the FBI director, having seen a number of them do their work, that can be made. While I agree you would be the boss of Kash Patel, I'm not sure that you would be able to intervene with every decision or position that he had or know what he's doing. So let's continue. Do you agree it is a duty of the Justice Department to defend the laws Congress passes? And will you commit to do even when the president may disagree with an act campaigned against its passage or called for its repeal? President Reagan's AG, William French Smith, said the department policy was the department has the duty to defend an act of Congress whenever a reasonable argument can be made in its support. So I'm specifically referring to the 2022 law that I long led that we passed to empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices, major savings for seniors. Will you commit to defend the law against the lawsuits from Big Pharma?
Senator, I was involved in big pharma cases when I was Attorney General of the state of Florida, and I will commit to protect the laws of the United States of America.
Okay, thank you. That would also, same question, with the Supreme Court is going to be hearing a challenge to the Affordable Care Act's coverage of preventative services. And despite the fact that you twice joined suits to have the entire Affordable Care Act invalidated, will you commit to defending this law?
Yeah, I believe this is very different. It's a very isolated, it's different. It's not the entire Affordable Care Act, but I will, it's pending litigation, of course, within the department.
Since the 1990s, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act has protected patients, providers, and facilities that provide reproductive health services. Will you commit to continuing to enforce the FACE Act to address violence and threats against those providing reproductive health care services?
Senator, the FACE Act not only protects abortion clinics, but it also protects pregnancy centers and people going for counseling. The law should be applied even-handedly. Yes, Senator.
So you'll uphold the enforcement of that law?
I'll uphold the enforcement of the law, Senator.
Okay, and I will ask my antitrust questions in the next round. We had a good discussion about that, and I do appreciate the nominee that has been put in place for the antitrust division, and there's incredibly important work that has to be done in that division. So
Gail
thank
Slater
you.
is remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank all of my colleagues for abiding by the 7-minute rule. Before I call on Senator Lee, I want everybody to plan on our first break would be about 11:50, and that would be 30 minutes for lunch. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Bondi, for being here today. I, too, share the assessment that Gail Slater is great. Had a great meeting with her yesterday. Just thrilled that you're here and that you're willing to serve. I'd like to talk to you as a longtime lawyer and one who has handled a variety of criminal matters about the Fourth Amendment. What can you tell us about the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement and why it's so important?
Well, the warrant requirement is so important, which I've dealt with that since I was in my 20s as a state prosecutor. A warrant is so important because it protects citizens' rights, and that's why it's so important.
All right, you've been listening to the potential Attorney General of the United States. She's been nominated by President-elect Trump. She is the former Attorney General of the state of Florida, Pam Bondi.